Chapter 10. The next day, more indignities followed. Her slate pencil went missing. She opened her dinner pail to find that someone had half filled it with water. The biscuit disintegrated into slurry. The bit of salt pork sodden. A slate was passed from hand to hand whenever Miss Walters had her back turned. Hannah caught a glimpse while the fourth reader students in front of her were snickering over it. Someone had drawn a crude, cruel caricature of her face, bucktooth and with slits for eyes. Above the drawing, the caption, "Dirty Chinaman." Below it, the words, "Were I you, I would not come to school." Her hurt was growing, and with it, her anger. She could feel the rage swelling and getting hotter inside her. She had to stop it. "They want me to lose my temper, try to get back at them somehow. Then they can say I'm a troublemaker and have me dismissed." She would not give them that satisfaction. For the rest of the day, she kept her head down so as not to meet anyone's eyes, attended to her studies, made sure that her face stayed blank. By the time school let out, she was exhausted. But the day was not over yet. Hannah hurried along 2nd Street as if it were possible to leave the unpleasantness behind her by getting home as quickly as she could. Approaching the alley behind the buildings on Main Street, she drew up short at the sounds of scuffling and voices. "Quit! Leave him alone!" "Catch you one more time!" Sam, the second voice, that was him. Hannah stayed where she was, hidden by the row of stables and haystacks that lined the alley. Sam emerged, dragging another boy by the collar. It was one of the Haywood brothers, either Tommy or Jimmy, who were not the same age but were both in the 4th reader class and looked so alike that Hannah could not yet tell them apart. What was Sam doing? Sam gave the boy a final shove. "Tommy, you just get on out of here," he shouted. Tommy almost lost his balance, but caught himself and scrambled away. Sam hurled something after him. Whatever it was hit a hitching post and shattered. Sam watched until Tommy was out of sight, then continued on his way down 2nd Street. Hannah's heart was thumping hard. She stole into the street to pick up one of the shards of whatever Sam had thrown. It was a piece of a slate. Written on it, smeared but still legible, were the words, "I, you." Friday. Never had Hannah so welcomed the end of a week. Only one more day to get through. Miss Walters spent the afternoon assigning each pupil a speaking piece. In 3 weeks' time, there would be an exhibition to celebrate the last day of the term. "Those of you in the 5th reader class will be allowed to choose your own piece," Miss Walters said, "with my approval. Please come to school on Monday prepared to discuss your choices. I would like each of you to make it at least 3 selections, and we will decide among them, so that we will not have people speaking the same piece. School is dismissed." Hannah had never recited a piece in front of an audience. She could tell that only a few of the other students truly liked the idea, but no one was surprised. It seemed that such exhibitions were expected as part of the school routine. Hannah was both intrigued and daunted. To stand alone before what would surely be most of the town and recite a piece of poetry or prose? What if she forgot the words? What if she slipped and stumbled while saying them? What if she simply froze and could not get a single word out? Those thoughts occupied her as she prepared to leave for the day. She had discovered that it was best for her to be the last pupil to leave the schoolroom. Most of the students were eager to go, heading out the door and the moment they were released. If she took her time tidying her desk and taking up her books, the schoolyard was usually deserted when she left, which meant that she avoided the other students. Miss Walters always bade her a friendly goodbye. On this day, Hannah found herself looking forward to the farewell for 2 reasons: because it meant the end of a harrowing week, and because of its sheer banality. Miss Walters said goodbye to all her students. It didn't matter who they were or what they looked like, and that included Hannah. To Hannah's relief, both Friday evening and Saturday were very busy, leaving little time for worry. Papa asked her to organize the shipment of goods that were stacked willy-nilly in the parlor of the rented house. She also made a quick visit to the shop site. She hadn't yet seen it. Other than going back and forth to school, she spent her days inside the rented house. Soon she would begin to feel penned in and restless, but for now, school was an adventure enough. And after all those weeks in the wagon, she relished staying in one place with a solid roof overhead, a cook stove, and a soft bed at night. The rented house was on the corner of 2nd Street and Main. The shop was on the east side of Main Street, down toward the livery. Hannah stood on the sidewalk in front of the lot and watched Papa hold the frame straight to the plumb line while Charlie Hart hammered away. A stocky, sturdy man in his 30s, Mr. Hart had a claim north of town and a fiancée named Angela in Ohio. He was working to earn enough for a house to replace the sod hut he was living in now. He hoped to go back to Ohio after harvest, get married, and bring Angela out before true winter. Ginger-haired with a beard to match, he was so fair-skinned that he was perpetually sunburned. Papa had said that he was a steady worker with expert carpentry skills. Better than mine, truth be told, Papa admitted. Hannah was impressed because Papa was himself a fine carpenter. Framing the front wall next, he said to her. Hannah glanced up and down the street. The shop fronts were structurally identical, 2 windows with a door between them. She imagined customers coming into their brand-new dress shop and felt a tinge of anticipation. Papa, have you already bought the door? She shook his head. Charlie's going to make it. Says it'll be better than a bought one. Why do you ask? Hoops, she answered. They're coming back in style, and they're too wide to go through an ordinary door. Women have to stop and tug at their skirts. It's a nuisance. Mr. Hart had stopped hammering and was listening. Huh, I've seen the ladies do that. Never thought about it before. It would be nice to have the only shop on the street where they could just sail right in, Hannah said. Mr. Hart scratched his head under his hat. Could do a double door, he said, and 1 window instead of 2, but a bigger one. Hannah nodded. A big window would be nice for displays, she said. Of dresses, she added silently. Papa put his hands on his hips. So, the 2 of you got that all decided, he said. Hannah held her breath as she glanced at him. Was he angry? He tossed the plumb line to Mr. Hart as he strode past her. Guess I better get to the lumber yard. Gonna need more wood for a double door. Hannah spent most of Saturday sorting through the shop supplies they had brought with them from Cheyenne. The button box, spools of thread, some reels of ribbons, hanks of embroidery floss, papers of needles and pins, assorted fasteners, box of dressmaker's chalk, a few skeins of knitting wool. 1 reel of plain red ribbon was almost spent. Hannah pulled off what was left. A little more than her hand span, probably around 9 inches, but both ends were somewhat frayed and would have to be trimmed. Not enough for a neck ribbon, barely enough for a decorative bow. She trimmed the ends and rolled up the short length carefully, then set it aside. She'd figure out some way to use it. That day she also accomplished something she'd been wanting to do for a while. The braid of prairie turnip had been hanging from a nail on the kitchen wall ever since they moved into the rented house. She snipped off 6 bulbs and put them to soak in a bowl of water. They'll be ready to cook on Tuesday. It was a small excitement, trying a food she'd never eaten before. She hoped she would like it, but even if she didn't, at least it would make that meal interesting. On Sunday, she and Papa went to church services, which were held in the railway depot. They slipped inside just as the service began and left during the last hymn. It was Hannah's first time. The previous week, Papa had gone without her. While some of the people seated at the back saw them come in, no one spoke to them. Hannah was discomfited by the stares and the nudges, but she knew it was good that she'd been seen attending church. One less thing for people to hold against her. She reminded Papa to tithe, which Mama had always insisted on out of gratitude to the missionaries who had cared for her in China. That night, Hannah slept poorly, wondering what she would face in school the next day. The sheets felt scratchy. The quilt lay askew no matter how many times she tried to straighten it. She shifted and squirmed for at least half the night. Monday morning came too quickly.